banking and really go through um, that I often get surrounding those pieces. So, what are voice message and legacy banking? Who should do them? Why would I do them? How do I do them? All of these pieces that kind of go into this concept that I think people throw around the terms, and oftentimes they're just concepts we haven't heard of. So, I just want to start by talking about kind of the differences between the three types of banking. Um, Oftentimes, they are used really interchangeably. People will say voice and message banking, and they may mean one or the other, but they're actually two different processes that produce kind of two different results. So, voice banking is a process where typically you're prompted through a series of sentences. There's like a software that's going to give you a bunch of really silly sentences to read because what it's trying to do is really parse apart all of the different parts of speech and how they sound as they kind of come up against each other. Because what that software then does is it breaks all of those sounds down and creates this synthetic version of your voice so that when you're typing a message, instead of the voice coming out sounding like Siri or Alexa, it's going to sound a little bit more like your unique vocal quality. And what this is really used for is for people who may need to use a communication tool like an iPad or something that we call like a speech generating device, communication device, all the same types of things. But if in the future you are needing to use something like that to help support communication, you're able to type out any message and it's going to sound like you and not like this Siri or Alexa voice. You don't have to have said it before. You don't have to record specific words in order to say it. You can type whatever you want and it's going to sound like you. Message banking, on the other hand, is a little bit different. With message banking, you get to pick what you're recording. So it's really messages that are important to you. Oftentimes, I encourage people to record messages that maybe are words or phrases they say a lot, what we kind of consider people's isms. So if there's a phrase or a movie quote or a Bible verse that you say a lot or will reference a lot, those can be really important things to message bank because you get to really choose how each one of those things sounds. And so when you're message banking, you get to record whatever sentences you want, and it's really going to capture everything that's unique about your voice. The rate at which you're talking, the volume, the emphasis you're using in sentences, so that you can use all of those pieces to make that message sound unique to you. And so the last kind of piece of that is legacy banking, which some people kind of incorporate into this message banking category. But basically, it's maybe messages that you might want to leave for family members or things that are very unique to who you are, who you think will help people remind themselves of you maybe after you've passed. I think that one is a very personal decision to do legacy banking. But a lot of times people will do voice banking, they'll do message banking. Sometimes they'll do both, and sometimes they'll do neither. But what I'm going to show you in this next slide is a video of one of kind of the leaders in the field of voice and message banking. His name is John Costello. And he is out of the ALS clinic in Boston Children's Hospital. And he has a video here where he'll type a sentence first and hit play. And it's going to show you the voice bank. So it's going to show you how this typed sentences is going to sound in this synthesized version of his voice. And then he's going to say it how he kind of meant it to sound to show you how that might be different from a message bank. So I hope this kind of shows the difference.
With you. You are the love of my life, and I am so glad you have been beside me. You are the love of my life, and I am so glad that you've been beside me. I am so proud of you. I am so proud of you.
So I'll stop it there. There's more, but I think you kind of get the idea that that first one, it is a synthesized voice. It sounds like him, but it's a little more robotic. Because the synthetic voices still can't capture things like change in tone or how putting emphasis on a different word might change the meaning of the sentence. And so that's kind of what our message banking is able to do that voice banking maybe isn't. Oop, let me move to the next slide here. Okay. So are there any questions about kind of the differences between those before I move on to some of the other pieces? Okay.
Yeah. Do you have to be able to type? My husband, being that he has dementia also,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure he'd be able to do something like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is definitely another piece and another consideration kind of that goes into the puzzle. He definitely could do message banking. You don't have to be able to type.
Okay.
He just would have to be able to say kind of phrases that he might like to say, or sometimes people will even have a recorder and they'll just lay it down on the table and have a conversation. And then you're able to kind of later we can go through and like break out the pieces that are important for that.
Oh,
And so that can be
okay.
something you can do too. And it helps capture the real naturalness of speech too, because you're really capturing it in the moment rather than just saying it into a recorder.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, and then there also too in the future, sometimes it can be hard for people um, for whatever reason, if they have any problems with eye muscles or just with some changes kind of cognitively too, to be able to type or use words. There are two communication devices or supports that will use pictures to help support communication as well. And sometimes that can kind of help alleviate some of those challenges you see. Mhm. Okay, so who is appropriate for voice message and legacy banking? Really, the answer is anyone who has the potential for a change in speech. So, um, when we think about ALS, a lot of people, we know that typically about 80% of people will experience some sort of change in their communication. Does that mean that they will completely not use speech anymore? No. But for some people, it can be hard to get the breath support to get a loud enough voice. For some people, it can mean that your voice feels strained or it can be really soft. And for other people, you might see changes in just how you're able to articulate sounds. So it might sound like speech is more slurred, or it might just be more difficult to understand when you're more tired or towards the end of the day when you've been using it a lot. And so, what's great about voice message and legacy banking is that you're able to use those in addition to using speech. So, even if you haven't experienced any changes yet, it's a really proactive way to save your voice and to do something in case you are experiencing changes later. Um, a lot of people who have done voice and message banking with me have said, you know, it's felt like the only like positive thing I've been able to do to kind of fight back against ALS, you know, because I'm able to say, like, you're not going to take my voice from me. And so for some people, that's really important. And for others, they don't mind using kind of a generic voice that comes on a device, and that is totally fine too. But it's great when you can start kind of early and make sure that you're capturing the pieces that make your voice really unique. Um, and so should people consider completing voice message and legacy banking? There's been a lot of studies about kind of this process, but I think the biggest piece for me that I've seen is that it can lead to an increased quality of life. Having this voice and message banking can allow you to know what communication changes might occur and be prepared for those in order to know what strategies you can use when communication maybe isn't going the way that we anticipated it would. And because it can increase kind of that communication, it can also lead to kind of this decreased risk of social withdrawal. You can help maintain personal relationships better and really continue to use your communication. Um, I think one of the most powerful studies that's been out is that there is one that looked specifically at views from people living with ALS and their caregivers and what voice and message banking has meant to them. And so I'm just going to read through a couple of the quotes. But this first one, an individual voice rather than a generic one is part of your identity. And maybe that will make you be treated as more of an individual rather than the generic voice generated by a machine. And so for a lot, I think it allows you to maintain some autonomy and helps remind people that you're still the same person that you were, even if there are a lot of other changes that ALS has caused. Um, and so that goes for not just your family members, but recognizing that you're still yourself, but also medical professionals and them talking to kind of you as the person with ALS and getting your input on your care. The other piece is this other quote. It would retain my personality. People would recognize it was me as opposed to being like a navigation system voice or something like that. So I think it's very important that I can still be me and people will know that it's me. And so again, I think even sometimes when, you saw in that video when he was typing some things and they were sounding a little bit flat, if it wasn't even in his voice too, sometimes some of the humor is lost or sometimes some of those more unique things can be lost. But when people are hearing it in your voice, they can, like they really are hearing the way that you're saying it. And I think that can be such a powerful communication tool to maintain. Um, and then from caregivers and significant others, this first one, it helps people like my wife save a piece of themselves. If I heard a synthetic voice speaking on behalf of my wife, I think it would take a lot of getting used to. I've listened to several synthetic voices and they don't seem to have any soul. Um, this was even in 2021, so it wasn't that long ago. They've gotten a lot better, the voices have, but they're still, I mean, they don't capture what's unique about us. That's why they're synthetic. And the other piece is we've spoken to family and friends, and they have all said the same thing. They would prefer my wife's banked voice compared to a synthetic voice. And I think that's one of the most important pieces is that oftentimes I hear more from family members how much they've appreciated that they voice and message banked than from the person themselves, because it helped them to maintain to that relationship and helped remind them that that person was still their mom or their dad or their wife or their husband. And I think that's been a really important piece. Overall, people, after they've completed voice and message banking, they've felt that it's helped them preserve their identity, really helped them keep control and fight back against ALS and help to maintain social networks. So within their family, but also with their community. And then I wanted to share this video too from an individual with ALS who completed message banking with John Costello in Boston and his kind of perspective on that process. Ooh, start.
ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. Takes me a little longer to speak or answer. Please bear with me. I use this to communicate.
computer with our family Todd uses with his vision, and he has synthetic voice, which is the Toby computer voice, as well. Todd has message banked his own voice years ago, so we also have Todd's voice loaded into Toby so he can use his voice.
Hey Kat, may I have a hug?
Everyday communication with the person you love, the person that you live with, your children. I wouldn't be able to have that communication with Todd if it wasn't for this technology. I don't think you realize how important communication is until you can't have it. I think Todd and I have realized the appreciation for everything because of the ALS. Everything's taken away from you. This is not. We have the communication piece, and it's a really big deal for us together.
And then the last piece I'll say too is for some people, again, they don't want just this voice. They feel that they'd like something a little bit more. And so this was another perspective that sometimes can get into that legacy banking category of, I would prefer to do something different. Recording a video for people to see is better than just a voice. And so for some people, they really want to have more than just this voice on a machine that, maybe once they aren't using the machine anymore isn't as meaningful as it was. I think sometimes it really depends on each person and what's going to feel the best for them and their family. And so how do you get started with voice message and legacy banking? There are a lot of different sites that you can use to do these pieces, and it can feel a little bit overwhelming. The first thing you can do is if you're connected with the ALS Association, you can reach out to your local care services manager. And I am always happy to connect with anybody who is interested in the process, do a Zoom meeting and talk through kind of what your priorities are and talk through what is the best way to get started. And I'm really happy to talk through that process with anybody who is interested in doing it. Some of the more nitty-gritty things. There are different steps for kind of voice banking. So again, that's creating that synthesized voice. Typically what happens is you create an account with whichever kind of voice banking software you're using, wait for approval, and then you record sentences and get to wait for what that voice is going to sound like. So typically to voice bank, all you need is a computer with internet and a microphone. It's recommended if you're in a quiet enough area, if there's not a bunch of construction going on outside, or, typically the vocal or the audio quality is completely fine to do it without a microphone, but it'll give you a little bit better if you do have some. We do have microphones available through the ALS Association for people to borrow to do just this process too. There are a lot of different voice banking softwares that you can record through, and all are kind of a little bit different. One of the ones that I see people use most often is Acapella My Own Voice, or MOV. You can do it with just recording 50 sentences. Typically it takes people about 15 to 20 minutes. You can add in a little bit more customization into that too to make it a little bit more of a unique voice, but it can occur really quickly, and typically you can get that kind of done and checked off the list. Other people like to use different softwares too, like VoiceKeeper or Vocal ID. Typically they require a hefty amount of sentences, so you might record more like 300 or even 1,600 for some. And so it's really all about, I think, measuring what your goal is with the voice and what you really want to put your time and effort into. I think if it's okay if the voice is not perfect, it's going to be synthetic and it's not going to sound just like you, then using one that's not going to take as much time is okay. If you want it to sound as close as possible, then it might be worth putting in that extra time. But those are things that when I meet with people typically to talk about the voice and message banking process, I love to talk through and really get an idea of what's important to you. And then we can kind of decide together which software is going to be the best for you to use as you record. So there are some different examples of what voices sound like on different software. So again, this is John Costello, the same guy, but you'll hear how he's done a few different voices. So using different softwares and kind of how they sound a little bit different.
Hello, this is John. My voice was created with 200 recordings.
Hello, this is John. My voice was created with 200 recordings.
Oh, I forgot. He first speaks it himself and then he plays it on the software. He always does this and it kind of throws me off. So then this is how he did it. That was with the Speak Unique software. This is with a different software.
Hello, this is John. My voice was created with 100 recordings.
Hello, this is John. My voice was created with 100 recordings.
Hello, this is John. My voice was created with 200 recordings.
Hello, this is John. My voice was created with 200 recordings.
Hello, this is John. My voice was created with 500 recordings.
Hello, this is John. My voice was created with 500 recordings.
Hello, this is John. My voice was created with 50 recordings.
Hello, this is John. My voice was created with 50 recordings.
And so you can definitely hear the difference in all of them, that as he did more recordings, it definitely got closer and more refined. But that, maybe the 50 sentences on one sounded pretty similar to like the 200 sentences on another. And so it's just about kind of trying things out and seeing what is going to be the best fit for you. For some people too, sometimes people hear about voice and message banking after they've already experienced too many changes. And there is a company that will do what they call a voice design. So basically they can use previous recordings, or you can use two different people who might sound like you, and they'll create a voice kind of meshing those two voices together. And then you're able to hear and choose from that too. And that is a process that is more recent and exists. Just some resources on things like voice banking and how to get started. But then when we look at that flip side of message and legacy banking, it's a little bit different. You don't have to start with the computer or the software or reading through sentences. You typically just are thinking about what you want to record, what messages and phrases, and you're putting those on a recorder, and then you upload them to a website so that they're all kind of in the same place if you needed to put them on a communication device in the future. And so again, the equipment that you need is, we typically recommend a Zoom recorder. Records in the highest quality, and it's really lightweight, pretty unobtrusive, so you can even just carry it around with you and record as things kind of pop into your head. You need an SD card to contain all of those, and then a way to get those onto the computer. So all of these two, not the computer with internet, but all of the Zoom recorder and the adapter are available through the ALS Association as well. And so one of the really great sites that has existed and kind of come out of John Costello's work is this mymessagebanking.com, where basically you're able to take all of your messages that you've recorded, you upload them onto this site, and it'll automatically transcribe what all of your audio recordings have said. So the importance of this is for in the future, if you're using a communication device, instead of having to go in and import each of these recordings one by one and label each button, and this is doing it automatically for you so that you don't have to do that again in the future. You're also able to add in these tags, or basically categories. So if you're recording different messages for, say, For example, I've done some message banking and have recordings for my dog, George. And so I have a whole tag that's just George. And so if I was using a communication device, I could go into my George folder and tell him to come or tell him to sit, or tell him to leave it, which is what I'm doing most often. And so all of those are options that I can do kind of within my messagebanking.com. And then again, there are lots of tutorials that exist. There are videos, there's step-by-step guides, but it's all about kind of what you need and what is going to be most supportive. One of the biggest questions I often get asked with message banking is like, okay, so you said, I just have to think of what I want to record and then I record it. What if I can't think of what I want to record? And that's something that I love to give out this resource. There are a couple others that are shorter too, but the Boston Children's Hospital team has compiled a list of, it's over 60 pages, it's a lot, of messages that people have banked in the past. I like to share it with people, not to encourage you to go through page by page and read every one, but because they have really good categories of different phrases. So they have things like idioms or personal care needs or jokes. And it just kind of helps, I think, spark some ideas of things that might be important to you or might be worth recording. There's also a process, and again, this is something that I often, if people are interested in both voice and message banking, we'll talk about as being the most efficient. But it's called double dipping, where basically you record all of your messages for message banking, and then you're able to use all of that as the material to create a voice, a synthetic voice too. So instead of having to also go on and record all these silly sentences, you don't have to do that. You can just use the messages that you've already created to make a synthetic voice as well as have those messages. Typically, they recommend that you should have about 750. I've had people do about 200 and it's fine. But again, it can just be a match for whatever fits best for you, because recording 200 messages for some people can feel extremely daunting, and just reading through 50 sentences can feel a lot more doable. And it's really just about what feels right for you. And then the additional consideration is just really like that time and energy investment and what the outcome is going to be like. So, those are kind of the pieces that we often try and balance when we're thinking about voice and message banking. What are your priorities? How much time and effort is that going to require? And what outcome is that going to meet that'll meet your priorities? And so those are things I like to kind of talk through with people to help you decide what's going to be best. Because I definitely don't want people to record thousands and thousands of messages if it's not kind of the outcome that they're hoping for. Oh, and that's it. And so that's really the big overview of voice message and legacy banking. But overall, like I said, I'm biased. I think communication is one of the most important things we do. And so I encourage everybody to consider voice and message banking and do whatever is right for you. But I'll open it up in case anybody has questions too, or thoughts or.
Well, first, let me say thank you so much, Kat. That was very informative and helpful for myself as well, because again, I'm familiar in very general terms with the process, but again, just highlighting the reactions from people who have done it. And I can just share from my own experience that, people oftentimes, the voice is like one of those things that you don't know what you got till it's gone. And, people just, the sound of, again, things that are special to you. You can't even, everybody is different with that. And I remember for myself, when my best friend had ALS, and she lost her voice very, very, very early on, that she was bulbar onset, and she lived for 11 years. And she had recorded in the early going, so her voice was still affected, but for her outgoing voice message, it just said something about, you've reached Connie and Tony and we're not here now. And, if you can leave a message after that dingy thing, I mean, I can practically hear it still in my, and so I would when I would call, I'd be like, oh, I hope they're not there so I can hear her voice again. So, I mean, it's like, you just don't even realize how important that is. And so I just think that this is such a gift. And again, the technology has come so far in the last few years in terms of how good it is. And I remember when Model Talker was kind of like the only game in town, and now there's all these other options. And we're also just so lucky to have Kat who can help guide people through that. What questions do people have?
I just have a comment. On one of the Facebook sites with ALS, people talk about this, and now I have more understanding as to what it really is and how it's done. And I thank you for that information.
Very
It's
neat.
definitely opened my eyes.
Absolutely. I'm glad I could share. I think there are terms that are often like thrown around, and I think it's not something that you know about unless you have to know about it. And so it's really, it's good to have that better understanding so you can decide what's right for you.
Well, and also I can say that the clinics, so especially like, for example, and I don't know at Gunderson Clinic in La Crosse, but I know the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, they routinely are, encouraging people to consider voice banking, because we're regularly getting requests, from the staff there, saying, can so-and-so borrow a voice recorder? One thing I want to just say as far as logistics with that is part of our experience with lending out this equipment that Kat has been referencing is that sometimes people will say, oh, sure, I'll take one of those. And then it sort of like sits on a shelf because it's like, we'll get around to doing that at some point, and they kind of forget they even have it. And so then we've had periods where we don't have any available because they're all out to people. So we've actually started a new process where we ask people to try and get their recordings done within a 2 to 4 month period. So we kind of remind people, and then that also sort of, forces people to wait to ask for it until they're ready to do it. And so just a heads up. So if you borrow that equipment, you're going to get some nudges from us to use it and take advantage of it and get those recordings done. And again, the voice can go quickly. So, it's important to do that while that voice is strong. Other questions, comments, anything about something other than voice banking?
I just have another quick question about the voice banking. Do those different programs that you're talking about, does that cost anything to use it? Okay, good.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So Team Gleason has a grant that they completely cover the cost of voice banking. So for a couple of the programs, I think it's VoiceKeeper and Acapella, they want you to get the grant like approved beforehand, but for all the others to record, it's totally free. It's just until you download. And so then it would be around the time of download that you would just need the grant, but they're very quick. So they're always really good at that.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Kat. That was very helpful.
It dawned on me as we got past the 2 o'clock hour that most of you have not been at a support group, and I don't know that I ever explained that it's from 1 to 2:30. It occurred to me that some of you at 2 o'clock might have been like, isn't this going to be over? Is she going to run out of time? So anyway, so typically it will be from 1 to 2:30. And so we have 10 more minutes to sort of wrap up again with any other final questions or comments or thoughts about a topic that is of interest to you that we could consider for next month.
So Diane, right now, do you have that equipment available, or is it loaned out?
Right. Well, I can't say for off the top of my head. Kathleen Heavler is our care services program supervisor or something. I can't remember her exact title, but she basically kind of handles that. So usually if somebody's interested in the equipment, I will reach out to her and we'll find out if there's one, and if we have one, then she'll pop it right in the mail.
And
Okay.
we do have some at the office right now.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, cool.
Yes, go ahead.
Just one voice, the voice thing. I guess when I first thought of it, heard the term, I know it when we were over Rochester, accent was that you just record a bunch of messages to your kids and whatever that they can access later on. That was I never considered what it's all about. And I guess for us, right now I'm doing an awful lot of lifting. There's another topic of lifting, of getting her up and sitting up in bed so she can slip out of bed, and then just a lot of. So I guess what the next step is, if finally the legs won't even hold her, where we go from there. And as far as bathroom, up 3-4 times during the night, the bathroom, getting her upright and out to the wheelchair and onto the stool, and so it's when day comes, you're almost exhausted from the night. So I guess that's questions we have in the future as to where we go with these different steps if things deteriorate further.
Well, and again, Ron and Karen, I'll reach out to you probably next week sometime, and we can kind of look at, is there a time to maybe connect and just talk through some of those things. I think the more people can kind of look ahead, what am I going to do when this happens? Or what will I do when that changes? Because those are the things that keep you up at night and that create a lot of anxiety. And to the extent that we can just share information about here's how people handle that, so that so that you're less anxious about it, I think that's really helpful a lot of times for folks.
Hey, thank you. Just fortunate my back still holds up.
Well, and that's the thing, is that it's really important that, and that's why there's a lot of equipment that's out there that will help with lifting and those kinds of things, because the truth is it's not going to do Karen any good if you hurt your back and you can hardly walk yourself, let alone trying to do lifting. And that can happen. So it's really about being proactive and planful and getting equipment that you need and practicing with it before it's critical and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, we just had first responders here last get her up, and as I whipped around to get the walker to her quickly, she went the other direction and
fell on the floor between the bed and the dresser.
That was more than I can do, pick her up flat from the floor. But that would appreciate that, yes. And I know a lot of people say to me, make sure you take care of yourself too. Well, that's fine and good, but okay, you just don't walk away from your responsibility.
And that's really, I mean, from the caregiver perspective, it's like, that's a constant mantra from people from the ALS Association as well. You need to take care of yourself. You're not going to do her or him any good if you're hurt, or if you're stressed out or whatever. But that just sometimes sounds like one more thing to add to my to-do list. Oh, and while you're at it, take care of yourself. And that is, it can be really hard. So it's a matter of trying to build in some good habits, some good practices, just, carving that time out, for yourself. So I have a friend who's in Hawaii who took care of her husband for 31 years. If you can imagine that, with ALS. And one time I was getting ready to do a support group specifically on the topic of caregiver support and stress. And I said, so any advice that, you can share with me to share with them? And she thought about it a while, and she said, there was a point where I needed to go do my yoga class or do something, for herself. And her husband kind of balked at it and was kind of like, well, I want you to be here with me. And she thought about it, and she said to him, here's the thing, honey, between the two of us, we have one healthy body. So we need to keep that body healthy so that we can get through this together. And I just thought that was a really interesting way to think about it. And so I've shared that often, and I think but like you said, Ron, easy to say, hard to do. So, we always encourage it. We support people finding ways to take care of themselves. But in the reality of day-to-day experiences, that can be easier said than done. Any final?
Karen,
go ahead, Karen.
I was just wondering if anybody else has experienced the problems with emotions. I can cry at the drop of a hat or laugh at the drop of a hat. And it gets really embarrassing sometimes when you're laughing at something that really isn't funny.
2 o'clock this morning, she's laughing when I'm trying to help her out. I didn't think it was very funny at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Probably not. I can share some things about that, but does anybody else have some experience with that?
Not yet.
Not me personally, but patients I've taken care of, yes.
So we typically, I'm assuming this is what that is what they call pseudobulbar affect, or PBA. I've actually seen commercials on TV now about it, for pharmaceuticals. There was actually a drug called Nudexta. In fact, I will add that to my list of stuff to email you about. Nudexta was actually a drug that was being trialed for ALS, for slowing down the progression, and it didn't work. It failed on its endpoints and all of that. However, what people were commenting on and reporting back to the trial people was that they had less of this pseudobulbar affect, this crying and laughing, which kind of gets triggered easily, and then it's hard to stop once it gets going. And so it can be embarrassing. Again, it's a socially awkward sort of a thing at 2 a.m. It's not very funny, as you said, Ron. And this Nudexta, which is a medication, is really, really good at helping with that. So I'll just send you just a little bit of information about that, but I would encourage you to talk to your doctor about, possibly that as something you could explore.
I believe, I believe at the ALS 4-hour clinic we had in Rochester last week. That sounds familiar. I think that was brought up.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Anything else? We're about to the end of our time. Like I said, I can't tell you how delighted I am. I'll get choked up to see you all and to have a great group together. We've just, for reasons that nobody can pin down, have just not had a lot of participation. So having all of you, because you will learn more from each other, both in terms of content, asking questions, how did you handle this, how did you handle that, but also just the idea of not being alone and knowing there's other people, and seeing each other each month is what will keep you coming back. So I'm very, very grateful to you all for carving out the time to join us today. I promise we'll have a wonderful conversation a month from now, and I look forward to having you join us then. Any final thoughts, comments, questions?
Just one quick comment. It's just shocking how many ALS people there are out there when you finally deal with it. And oh, my brother has, they're all over the place.
Yep. That's a common reaction. And I still to this day will say, if I'm talking to somebody about what I do or whatever, and they'll say, ALS, what is that again? And I'm like, you know what, if you don't know what it is, count your blessings.
There you go.
Because the people that do know about it know how really gosh awful it is. Several of you have mentioned Facebook groups. I think they can be extremely helpful. They can be a little hard because a lot of times people will post about their loved ones that passed and things like that. It can be a little bit hard, but there's so much great information from people just sharing with each other their own experiences. So
My only thing is for Ron and Karen, if they have any neighbors, someone that can even just come in and, sit for a while so he can rest or get a break or help with something around the house or outside. Because that's one of the biggest things. And I guess that's one of my blessings is I know I have people that I can count on to help when needed.
I know with my wife, that's, we have a hobby farm, so I was canning tomato juice this morning and freezing cauliflower and picking up some of these things. And but one thing I know it's embarrassing to her. We've had a lady from our church who works in nursing and whatever offered begging to help. Her thing is the embarrassment with the bathroom situation that it's kind of a
it's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's not.
Well, but also, if I'm recalling, Bobby Joe, you're a nurse, right?
I was a CNA for 15 years and then became a nurse.
Right.
Yeah.
So And what you say is completely true, is there's nothing to be embarrassed about, but the reality is that in our culture and in our realities,
Right.
it is awkward. And even
Yes.
for those of you who remember Tuesdays with Maury, and he was talking with Ted Koppel, and Ted
yeah.
Koppel said, what worries you the most? And he said, pardon my quote, but he said, well, I know that someday somebody's going to have to wipe my ass. And, you know, that was kind of the marker of, have you gotten to that point yet? When Ted Koppel was interviewing Maury Schwartz. And so, I mean, it is a reality that as much as we can try to normalize it and everything, in our reality, it's not normal to have somebody else have to step in and help with those things. So,
Right.
so it's a good point. But so I'm thinking I will process this. But one of the things we might consider for our next conversation is caregiver support. And what does that look like? I mean, a lot of times I wait until November to talk about that because that's National Family Caregiver Month. But that may be something that would be helpful sooner than later, and kind of talking about how do we, like you're pointing out, enlist those neighbors and those friends and those church members that say, let me know when I can help. And we say, sure, I will, but we don't. So, you know, how do we kind of facilitate some of that? So, well, I don't want to go too much over. So I thank you all. Thank you again, Kat, for doing your wonderful presentation. Thank you so much to Carolyn and Roxanne for all the support you've provided down in La Crosse and continue to. I'll try to get that email out here in the next day or two so that you have that follow-up information, especially about the meeting next week. And I just wish you all the best of luck. Don't ever hesitate to give me a call or shoot me an email or a text or whatever, if there's anything I can be helpful with.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care,
Have a
everybody. Have a
good
great
day.
afternoon. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.